Welcome everyone to today's presentation on school to work transition. As the subtitle says, this is going to be focusing on different tips and tricks for adjusting to a new job. Whether you've just graduated and you're just entering the workforce, or maybe you've just made a pivot into a new career field, just started a new job later in your career. There's some good refreshing items on here that might be helpful as you're going into this process, but especially if you're new to the workforce, maybe this is your first full-time job, there's some different things that will be helpful as we are going into this topic. So as we begin, you've many times, if you're watching this presentation, you probably have just graduated. And if so, congratulations. And if you're watching this, chances are you are either in the process of job hunting, maybe you've just gotten a job offer, or maybe you just got the job and you're thinking about, okay, what are some different things that I should be keeping in mind as I'm getting started in this next chapter of my life? So we're going to divide this presentation into a couple of different sections. First, we're going to be focusing on the things to be thinking about during that initial transition, the first few weeks on the job. What are some things that you want to do in order to make a strong first impression as you're making connections with some of your new colleagues, with your supervisor, with supervisors of other departments? What are some ways to navigate that? And then we'll also transition into going forward after your first few weeks, your first couple of months. What are some things that you want to keep in mind as you're continuing to work in that job environment? So let's get started and talk about the first few weeks on the job. And there's a few key points that we like to emphasize as you're going into that beginning stage. Is first of all, going even a step further with beyond being on time, it's a good idea to get there early, especially your first day. Even if maybe you drove to the office for your interview, just anticipate if there's going to be traffic, try to be there a few minutes early, build it into your schedule just to be on the safe side. You're still trying to make that strong impression. You were hired for a reason. They like you, they want you to be there, but you also want to, again, keep that strong first impression, especially with your coworkers, your new teammates. You want to make sure that you're presenting the best image possible. And being prepared if there's anything that you need to bring, making sure that you have that ready with you. It might be a good idea even to bring a notebook or 3x5 card, whatever note-taking elements you like to bring with you. It can be a good idea to even take some notes as you're going around and learning names of different people, different processes as you're going through training. Sometimes that can be useful as you're going through that. This next one is tied into the image here. Slowly bring in personal items. Now, every office has a different culture, a different dynamic. The image here, there's always that one person in the office. Maybe you are that person. Maybe you know that person who has a lot of different personalized items. Maybe it's personal photos. Maybe it's collections of different things, decorating around the office. And this may be perfectly fine. This might be a little bit of an extreme example in the image, but it depends on your industry. It depends on your individual office. So that's why we say maybe slowly bring in personal items, which maybe is something you were already planning to do anyway, but take your cue from the office. Often your first day or your first couple of days, you're going to get a tour of the facility, of the office space where you're going to be working, and you'll be able to see other people's desks, other people's workspaces, how they decorate. They might even give you some suggestions. They might even encourage, hey, personalize this as much as you want. Bring in whatever you want. There may be that might be welcomed. In other industries, for example, if you're working in a office where maybe you're having to bring customers or clients to sit down at your desk, if it's cluttered with a lot of personal items, sometimes that can unintentionally give maybe the wrong impression, or maybe that's something that your supervisor doesn't want. Maybe there's a limit. So whatever that might be, you're going to be able to take your cue from kind of that office environment as you get to know the dynamics around that space. Finally, this last one, be nice to everyone, which seems to go without saying, but it's that same principle, a lot of the same principles that we advise when you're going into your interview. Often there's that idea of the interview starts as soon as you're on the property. So even being kind to the janitor who's working in the hallway, being kind to the person who's walking out of the office on the sidewalk, walking in the parking lot. That same principle carries through even after you've been hired, which seems self-evident, but it's just a good reminder to be aware that your people are watching you. They're noticing different things about your personality. How do you react? How do you treat others? Are you making eye contact? Are you bringing that positive energy into the team? So thinking about what that first impression is and what do you want to be known for? That's a common thread that we'll be touching on throughout this presentation. Some other things you may want to think about are things we just kind of touched on, office dynamics, workplace etiquette, and sometimes, especially if you're transitioning from a part-time job or another full-time job, if you're joining another team, it could even be within the same organization. Sometimes you might be an internal hire. You were already working for a company, maybe as an intern or maybe as working in a different job in a different department, but sometimes there's differences even in a different department that's in the same organization. The supervisor might have a different preference from how things were done in your previous department. So whatever that is, take some time the first few weeks to kind of get to know what are the preferences of that supervisor. What's the communication style of that supervisor? There may be some differences or even how different things are approached. So take that time to observe and to be sensitive to any specific things that either supervisors, even teammates, team leads may have as you're going into that new environment. And how do things really get done? Sometimes there's also that distinction between, all right, here's what is listed here on this presentation in my new hire training, but then there's some additional details that you may be learning as part of the new hire training process. A lot of this is just involved with listening, listening, listening. Finally, this last point, whom to form an alliance with. This may seem a little bit dramatic in the wording of this statement. Alliance sounds a little bit formal, but really the general principle is to take into consideration who would be good people, maybe who would even be a good mentor. Maybe you are making connections with different people and you notice that someone is very experienced in this field and they're very open, they're very easy to talk to. Maybe that's someone that you want to get to know better and get to have lunch with. And sometimes people might reach out to you to offer to go to lunch, but after your first few weeks, feel free to reach out to them too and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go down to the coffee bar. Do you want to join me? Just making those little gestures of building those connections with others can be very helpful as you're starting out in a new company or a new organization. With that being said, there's also some additional things to keep in mind as you're building those different connections, those different relationships. Be that person who volunteers, become that go-to person, be someone that people know you can be relied upon to finish a project on time, to contribute to that team. Also, being a team player also involves not gossiping, not feeding into that. And with that being said, this brings up a good point. Sometimes you can't control what people around you are saying or are observing about others, but you can make the decision of whether you're going to feed into that, if you're going to participate in those conversations. You can still be polite, but sometimes that's where you have to make that distinction between deciding whether this is someone you're going to maybe spend more time with, or maybe you're going to be investing more in other relationships around the office. With that being said, this also comes into mind as you are taking on new projects, as you are taking on new responsibilities, as you're going through training. Sometimes there's a point where you may be asked to offer a suggestion or offer an idea that you might have. The key here is balance. As you're still learning new processes, sometimes it can be tempting to try to offer additional suggestions, which is not a bad thing in itself. But you just want to be careful not to offer too much. There's a balance to it all as people are still getting to know you, and also as you're still getting to know different processes and getting to know the culture of that office. So keep that in mind. You kind of tread softly in those first few weeks. And then as you get to know people better and get to know the different supervisors, the different team leads, you'll be able to judge that dynamic of, is this a good time? And sometimes it's just a matter of timing. Sometimes you can still bring up that suggestion, but maybe it's a good time to bring it up one-on-one with your supervisor instead of in a group setting. But you'll be able to make that distinction as you are learning about that new workplace. The same thing goes with questions. It's natural to have questions as you're learning a new job, so please don't ever feel like you can't ask questions. But a good rule of thumb is as you're going through training, as you are learning about the different go-to people, often your supervisor is going to put you in contact with someone. Hey, if you have questions about this, make sure that you're reaching out to this person over here. They'll be able to assist with those types of questions. But as you are gaining more experience, and the first few weeks, it may be natural to have a lot of questions, but as you start to get more familiar with the different resources that are available, that's when it can be helpful to sometimes when you do ask questions, depending on the nature of the question, you can also mention what you've done so far to try to answer the question yourself. Hey, I was looking in the training manual, I was looking in our database, I was trying to check this out. These are the steps I took to try to find the answer, but I'm still having trouble locating the specific answer to this question. And that way it shows that you are taking ownership. It shows that you're being proactive, that you're taking those additional steps before asking that question. A lot of this, though, again, there's a balance to it. It's not to say you can't ask questions, and it depends a lot on the dynamics of your workplace. You will often have a mentor, especially if you're newer to the workforce. So in those cases, many times they'll be saying, hey, there's no such thing as asking too many questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. But as you're gaining more experience, you'll eventually transition to taking more ownership of some of those questions. With all this being said, as you're again getting to know the network of the people that you're working with, the clientele you're working with, the new rules and processes and procedures, also take some time to sometimes write down some ideas for when it is an appropriate time to be bringing up those suggestions, when it is a time to maybe have that performance review, or to think about what are some of the goals for yourself that you want to be achieving in the next few weeks, in the next few months. What is a new task that you want to learn how to do really well? What is it, maybe someone new that you want to get to know a little bit better in the office, maybe form a new connection with someone. There's different things that you can decide how you want to proceed, but also, again, that's part of taking ownership as you're joining that new team. So we've talked about some different things to keep in mind during your first few weeks, but now as you start to transition into the next few months, maybe that first year of working in that office, there will be natural stressors as you're going into a new job, a new environment. And so it's a good time to think about work-life balance. What are some things that you do in your off time that help you manage your stress? For some people, it might be going for a jog. For others, it might be spending time with friends or spending time with your pet. Whatever it might be, remember to also show yourself some grace and mercy. Remember that you are learning a lot of new tasks, and it's normal to sometimes feel a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit stressed, but do what you can to try to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're finding that good balance. And if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, that's when that opportunity, as you're building those connections and building that connection, that trust with your supervisor, it can be helpful sometimes when they are reaching out to you and they're like, hey, how are you doing? That's when it might be an appropriate time, if you ever are feeling like the stress is maybe coming to a head, to have that conversation with your supervisor in a professional way. Maybe see, hey, I'd love to talk with you sometime this week. Is there a time that we can maybe schedule some time just to talk one-on-one? And that could be an appropriate time to share if for some reason if you are feeling overwhelmed in certain areas. It's a great time to try to address that earlier versus later if it's something that hasn't been able to be balanced up to that point. Part of that, though, again, is coming back to those different points that we talked about earlier: emotional intelligence, listening before offering an opinion. Sometimes as you gain more insight into different people's personalities or dynamics around the workplace, you realize, oh, okay, this is how this is done, or this person didn't mean anything by saying this. This is where this person was coming from. And there's different ways as you're getting to know different people. There's also different opportunities, such as professional organizations. There might be even an employment. Sometimes there's different groups that are actually offered through your company where you get to know other people in the same type of position that you're in, or even a new employee kind of mixer. That could be a great opportunity to get to know other people, whether it's in your department or even outside of your department. Don't turn down those connections. It's a great way to get to know other people and also feel supported in your new role. So again, as you're going through that process, you're going to be meeting different people. Sometimes they might be even from different generations, different cultural backgrounds. It's a good idea to be practicing that empathy by paying attention to what other people are feeling, getting to know your own strengths and weaknesses, which you probably already reflected on as you were going through your interview process. But continue to do that. Continue to reflect on what are some new things I'm learning, what are some areas that I want to continue to grow in. And a lot of that can also sometimes be learned as you're interacting with others, as you're learning about other people's points of views, and you're asking good questions. As you're continuing in that contemporary job market, as you're continuing and working in different roles, it's important to develop that sensitivity and openness to diversity and multicultural differences. So a great way to do that, again, it's kind of a recurring theme here, is to continue to listen to others and to understand where people are coming from. This final point, talking about mentors, and depending on your role, you may even be assigned a mentor by your supervisor. In other cases, you may not. You might be in a situation where maybe you're not working in a team environment as much. You might be more independent, but that doesn't mean you can't still find a mentor. It kind of goes back to the earlier part of the conversation as you're getting to know different people. If you find someone that is experienced in this field and you want to kind of get to know more about what has made them successful or what has helped them as they've gotten started in a new job, again, that's where you can take that initiative. Don't ever feel like you have to wait for someone to reach out. Sometimes it's helpful to take that next step and just invite someone to go get coffee or to go get lunch together and to have that conversation. It could either be more formal, where maybe this is something you do once a month, or it could be something you just do at once and you kind of get to know someone better and decide if this is something you want to continue to do. You have some flexibility as you're going through that process. A lot of the things that we're talking about today all boil down to this core question. What do you want to be known for as the quote unquote new person in the office? What are the key traits that you want people to notice about you in your first few weeks? Are you a team player? Are you positive? You're not bringing negative energy. You're not bringing baggage from previous jobs into a new job. You're trying to create as welcoming an environment as possible for the people that you interact with. So those are some different things that can be helpful as you're reflecting, as you're preparing to go into a new job, and as you're going through the first few weeks and first few months of being in that new position. Now that we've talked about some helpful things that you want to keep in mind when you're starting a new job, we also want to talk about some of the common mistakes. And there's going to be a balance to each of these. It doesn't necessarily mean, as you're looking through some of these, it doesn't mean that you can't be friendly. It doesn't mean that you can't you can't use social media. Again, it's all about that balancing act. This first point, being too friendly too fast. A lot of this has to do with being genuine. If you're trying too hard to make friends, if you're trying to be overly friendly, it can sometimes come across as insincere, and people that can sometimes alienate people. So with that, the big key is just try to be yourself. Like, yes, be friendly, smile, make eye contact, make polite conversation, but also try to be yourself as well and take in that time. Sometimes you'll get to know people around the office, and you have some personalities you may really click with, others you may not click with as much, but you won't really know until you give it time. So before passing judgments one way or another too quickly, give it that time to settle, and then you'll be able to make a better decision as you're going through that. Social media. Uh, this is a great time if you haven't already, as you've been going through the job interview process, but now as you're entering the workforce, this is a great time to go back and check your privacy settings on all of your personal social media accounts. It's often a good idea to set everything to private, so that way people from your company can't necessarily read what you're posting. But even that being said, even if you have everything set to private, be thinking about, are you friending people who are working at your company? Because sometimes that can create additional insight depending on the platform that you're using. Sometimes people who are connected to your direct contacts on that social media platform, sometimes they can also see your account if they're connected through, it's usually kind of that 3-person rule. So just look at the different platforms, double check what the rules are on those different privacy settings. And if you have a LinkedIn account, that's often something that is is, public, and different companies will have different rules, often regarding social media, different preferences. So make sure you're familiar with those. Get to know those, read those in your first few weeks as you're getting acquainted with the different policies and procedures associated with your office. Again, it's not to say that you can't use social media. It's just a matter of being conscious of what you post and whether you feel that's something that you want your job to be reading and being aware of. And if something does go viral, what do you want that to be viral? Do you want that to be a positive thing, or is that something that maybe had unintended consequences, which we'll talk more about here in a moment? Trusting the wrong people. This is again kind of connected to that first point, getting to know people well before you start really developing those different connections. And it's not necessarily that there's going to be someone who's going to be, seeking harm towards others. It's more of a matter sometimes of a situation where maybe you get to know someone, you thought you knew someone, and then all of a sudden you turn around and maybe that same person who's maybe very friendly, very welcoming, is suddenly bad mouthing the manager. And you realize that you've made a closer connection with someone, then you realize, ooh, there's this other side to them that I didn't know. So that's just a quick example of something where it's good to sometimes, be polite to make those connections, but also take it slowly, get to know people well before really establishing those closer connections. These last 2 points are related. Coming off as a know-it-all, no one really likes a know-it-all, and really that has to do a lot with attitude. It's that difference between making something all about yourself versus making it about the team, being seen as a threat. There's that balance of you having that team mentality versus that me mentality, and so this could be a good time to sometimes reflect. When I'm having a conversation and if I'm talking about something I achieved, it's not bad to be confident. You should be confident, but make sure that you're acknowledging everyone who was part of that project. Make sure you're acknowledging the contributions that other people made instead of assuming credit for things that maybe was actually a team effort. It's just a good time to reflect on different aspects related to that and think about how it looks to others. With that being said, I'm also going to now share a video clip. This came out a few years ago about some of the risks of when social media connections, when someone goes viral for the wrong reasons, and trying to find that balance in the age of social media. Some of the things that are listed here, they may be, they're from a few years ago, but the general principles and the lessons that come out of it are still applicable today. And so for that reason, I'll be showing part of this clip so that way you can take a look at that and reflect on it.
We got milk, chicken, ground beef.
Adam and Amy Smith are on their weekly supermarket run in Portland, Oregon.
There's free-range chicken.
We love your chicken, and it's $5.99. We'll take it.
Adam graduated top of his class at business school, a go-getter, a high flyer. But now this father of four is shopping with food stamps.
Tomatoes? No. That's too much. Depending on the price.
Oh, never mind.
In some ways, it feels like I have completely failed.
From 200 grand a year, you're on food stamps?
Yeah, my voice is cracking right now because I never thought I'd be there. It's humbling.
He's talking about his spectacular fall for the very first time, talking to us.
Well, we were living in our dream house. It was beautiful, on 3.5 acres.
Smith lost that beautiful home in Tucson, Arizona after he was fired from his job as CFO of a medical device manufacturer 2.5 years ago. The reason? An infamous internet incident spawned by nationwide protests at Chick-fil-A.
Now, one of the most popular fast food chains in the country is under fire this morning.
You may recall the kerfuffle erupted when the chicken chain's president took a public stand against same-sex marriage.
Confirming that the fast food chain is the new ground zero in the culture wars over gay marriage.
Count Adam Smith a casualty of that war. All because of a 2-minute, 20-second YouTube video that started like this.
Well, I'm waiting in line. I'm next in line. Here I go.
Smith's humbling experience wasn't caught on camera by someone else. No, he's the only person who pressed send.
People have to have their Chick-fil-A anti-gay breakfast sandwich.
You'd filmed yourself and then you made the decision.
Yeah,
You posted it.
I did it. Yeah.
We'll get back to Smith and the details of his cautionary tale in just a minute. Listen, hitting the send button, we do it all the time without really thinking. Sending emails, texts, tweets, selfies, videos out into the world. It can be life-changing. career ending. Just ask these people. The school bus driver posting a beer-swilling selfie. The woman who came to the office dressed as a Boston Marathon bombing victim. And the naughty 10th grade math teacher known as Crunk Bear posting saucy pics and drug talk. Fired, fired, fired.
Every time I look at hiring somebody, I go and gather their digital footprint from every source I can get.
Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary is not alone.
Most companies now, mine included, employ people that specialize in just watching what's happening on all the platforms.
Remember PR exec Justine Sacco? She learned that the hard way when she tweeted, "Going to Africa. Hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding. I'm white." Yeah, she's a PR executive.
And she kind of chuckled to herself. This was at Heathrow Airport. Press send.
She says it's meant to be a comment on white privilege, but people didn't get the joke, and the tweet went viral while she was in the air heading to Africa. She had no idea.
A hashtag started to trend worldwide. Has Justine landed yet? Because everybody was so excited about Justine landing and realising that her life would never be the same again.
Back now to Adam Smith, who in the summer of 2012 decided to protest against Chick-fil-A.
What's wrong with Chick-fil-A in your mind?
They donated to anti-gay groups.
There were anti and pro protests. Now Smith got in line at his local drive-thru.
There's a long line of cars too. I don't know if you can see, but it's
Here's what happened.
awesome. You know why I'm getting the free water, right? I do not. Because Chick-fil-A is a hateful corporation.
And then he got carried away.
I don't know how you live with yourself and work here. I don't understand it. This is a horrible corporation with horrible values. You deserve better.
I got emotional about it.
And said things to the clerk that you regret?
I don't regret the stand that I took, but I regret the way I talked to her.
I just can't stand the hate, you know? It gotta stop. It's gotta stop, guys.
Smith pressed send, went to bed, woke up, went to work.
And the receptionist, first thing, big eyes, "Adam, what did you do?" The voicemail is completely full, and it's full of bomb threats.
You were asked to resign?
Yeah.
He refused and was fired, losing his six-figure salary and stock options.
Worth?
It was over $1 million.
And it's gone?
It was taken when I lost my employment.
The money, that beautiful home, all gone. They had to super downsize. No big house, no space for big toys.
This is Sterling. Open. Give all we own to Goodwill. Oh, is that your Easy Bake Oven? Is that one of your favorite toys?
Did you have a swimming pool?
Yeah, we had jacuzzi.
You had a jacuzzi?
What are you fishing for?
We're getting off the point here. Smith quickly apologized to the clerk he got angry with.
I am so very sorry for the way I spoke to you.
She has forgiven him.
I do forgive Adam Smith. I think he realizes how bad of a decision it was to make that tape.
But apparently some others have not. Okay, so fired from one CFO job, Adam applied for another, 1,200 miles away in Portland, Oregon. He got it. The family had to move, but a job, a fresh start. Hooray.
I hesitate to even ask what happened next.
It was 2 weeks on the job. I got called into the CFO's office, and they said that you should have told us about the Chick-fil-A video. You're fired.
So he started showing the so-called chicken incident video at job interviews to get it out in the open. Rejection, rejection, rejection.
The constant rejection that he's had going forward has been really brutal.
Wife Amy is now the family breadwinner.
This might sound silly, but change your name, dye your hair, grow a different beard.
All things that were recommended, and some of those things I tried.
Occasionally he'd get an offer, then always a call or a voicemail like this.
I just don't want to see this be a distraction or any backlash. Some of the others have expressed some concern.
Adam Smith, self-made man, reduced to nothing. His kid.
So 4 times we're going to pause the video clip there, but the main principle behind it just being a reminder of getting familiar with your company's policies surrounding social media, being conscious of how things, sometimes it's not necessarily what you're saying. Sometimes it's a matter of how it's being said, and sometimes the long-term ramifications of that. In this specific case, the CFO, it took him years to recover from that incident. He did eventually end up finding work, but it involved having to relocate, in that case, to another country in order to completely start over. So a bit of an extreme example, but again, just a reminder of thinking about some of those different actions, how they can have long-term consequences. So now transitioning to another topic, talking about different experiences. So this is kind of thinking about going forward, even beyond that initial phase of starting a new job. If your job is offering professional development opportunities, hey, you have an opportunity to go to this conference, you have this opportunity to participate in this specific training. Take advantage of it. If there's anything you can do to diversify your skills, take advantage of connecting with new people, absolutely be sure to do that. If there's networking groups, as we mentioned earlier, that are available through your company or maybe in your industry, in your field, joining a professional membership, absolutely take advantage of anything that you can do to, again, strengthen your existing role and the different experiences that you're having in your current position, but also, as it says here, making yourself more marketable for the future, being aware of new positions. And with that being said, there's a balance again to this. You're still being loyal to the current role in the current company that you're working with, but it doesn't hurt to be aware of different trends in your industry. If there's any changes, new topics, especially with the advent of AI being a recent example, if there's anything that you can be doing in professional development to make sure that you're keeping yourself competitive, whether you stay in your current company or whether you consider in another year or so making that jump to a new company or new opportunity. It's all about remaining adaptable. And a big part of being adaptable is welcoming that feedback from others, whether that's from your supervisor, whether it's from peers, and also doing that self-reflection too. That's part of embracing that growth mindset and exercising some of those other traits we mentioned earlier about emotional intelligence, about listening, taking other people's perspectives into consideration. All of those different habits can contribute to your professional development and your growth, whether you stay in one company and you advance through that, or whether you make that transition into something new. Whatever that might look like, wherever your future may take you, it's important to develop the habit of setting goals. And there's a great way to do that. Some people really like using vision boards, kind of adding different graphics, different sayings, different inspirational quotes that can kind of help you and make sure that you're staying committed to those goals. A lot of people also like to use SMART goals, SMART standing for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So there's some kind of timeline where you're trying to achieve that goal, or maybe if you're not achieving it, it's just a milestone. It's a time to check in. Am I still on track to meeting that long-term goal? What things do I need to do in the short term in order to eventually meet that long-term goal? And it can just be something even as simple as, I want to learn how to become a better public speaker. Maybe if my company offers something that's on LinkedIn Learning for free, maybe I'm going to watch some different classes on how to become a better public speaker, or I'm going to join a professional group that has people practice giving short speeches in a public setting. There's various different ways that you can take advantage of the different connections, either within your department or even in your local community, to again stay committed to those specific goals. And it doesn't have to be exclusively professional goals too. It could be things that I just want to become a better listener. It could be things that could be applicable to your personal life as well. So whatever that is, as you're starting a new job, as you're transitioning to a new job, if you're thinking about maybe changing jobs, I hope that these different pieces of advice can be helpful as you're reflecting on these and considering what your next step is in life. But whatever it is, we wish you the very best as you continue to explore ways to develop yourself professionally.